Here are 5 people who were buried alive and what happened when they woke up 6 feet underground. You're Marjorie McCall, living in Ireland in the early 1700s, and you've just died. Or at least, everyone thinks you have. You collapse suddenly, no pulse, no breathing, completely lifeless. Your husband John is devastated, your family mourns, they prepare your body for burial, dressing you in your finest clothes and your most valuable piece of jewelry, a thick gold ring that your husband had given you on your wedding day. It's stuck on your finger, swollen from your illness, but it won't come off no matter how hard they pull, so they bury you wearing it. That night, 2 grave robbers are watching from the shadows. They saw the ring during your wake, and they know exactly what they're doing. They wait until the mourners leave, until the cemetery is dark and empty. Then they start digging. The soil is still soft and easy to move. Within an hour, they've reached your coffin. They pry it open, and there you are, pale and cold and dead. Beautiful ring on your finger. One of them tries to pull it off, but it still won't budge. Your finger is too swollen. The other grave robber has a solution. He pulls out a knife and starts sawing through your finger to get the ring off. The blade cuts into your flesh, and something impossible happens. You feel it. The pain jolts you back to consciousness. Your eyes snap open. You see 2 terrified men staring down at you. You scream. They scream louder. One drops the knife and runs. The other is so terrified he falls backward into the grave dirt. You sit up in your coffin, blood pouring from your partially severed finger, dirt in your hair, still wearing your burial dress. The grave robbers run away, screaming about ghosts and demons, leaving their shovels behind. You climb out of your own grave, stumble through the cemetery, and walk home. Your husband is sitting by the fire, alone with his grief. There's a knock at the door. He opens it. His dead wife is standing there, covered in dirt, bleeding, very much alive. He faints. You collapse. The servants start screaming. It's absolute chaos. But you survive. You recover from your cataleptic state, your finger heals, and you live for many more years. When you actually die decades later, they bury you in the same cemetery. Your gravestone becomes famous, bearing the inscription, "Lived once, buried twice." The grave robbers are never caught, but according to legend, one of them ended up in an asylum, driven mad by the experience of watching a corpse come back to life. The other supposedly became a priest and never committed another crime. Your wedding ring? John had it melted down and remade into 2 rings, one for him, one for you, so it could never cause trouble again. Let's jump forward to 1891 West Virginia, where a woman's worst nightmare became reality. You're Octavia Hatcher, and you've just lost your infant son to an unknown illness. The grief is overwhelming, crushing, unbearable. You fall into a deep depression. You stop eating. You barely speak. Your family is worried about you, but this is 1891, and mental health treatment consists of try to cheer up. Days pass, maybe weeks. You grow weaker and weaker. Then one morning, your husband finds you in bed, cold and still. No pulse, no breath. Dead from grief, the doctor says. Happens sometimes. Broken heart syndrome. They prepare your funeral quickly. It's May, it's warm, bodies don't keep long in the heat. Your husband Jacob is destroyed. First his son, now his wife. They hold a small service and bury you in the family plot. The town mourns the tragic young mother who died of heartbreak. Jacob visits your grave every day, bringing flowers, talking to you like you can still hear him. But then something strange starts happening in the area. A few weeks after your burial, another person in town falls into a similar mysterious coma. They look dead, no detectable pulse, cold skin, no breath. But this time, the doctor waits a bit longer before declaring death. And the person wakes up. They're diagnosed with a condition now known as sleeping sickness or catalepsy, possibly caused by tsetse flies or a local epidemic. The person was alive the whole time, just in a death-like state. Jacob's heart stops when he hears this news. The doctor confirms that yes, the symptoms match what Octavia had. She might have been alive, might have been buried alive. Jacob runs to the cemetery and immediately orders your grave to be opened. The workers dig frantically. They reach the coffin and pry it open. The sight inside destroys everyone present. Your body has turned over in the coffin. Your burial dress is torn and twisted. Your fingernails are broken and bloody. And the interior lid of the coffin is covered in scratches, deep gouges in the wood where you clawed and scraped, trying desperately to get out. Your face is frozen in a final expression of terror. You woke up in the darkness, trapped in a box underground, and you died again, this time fully conscious, fully aware, buried alive, screaming where no one could hear you. Jakob never recovers. He's consumed by guilt. He builds an elaborate monument over your grave, as if a fancy gravestone could somehow apologize for letting you suffocate in a coffin. He becomes obsessed with preventing this from happening to anyone else, donating money to install bells in the local cemetery so future buried people could ring for help. The Hatcher Monument still stands today in Pikeville, Kentucky, a reminder of the woman who was buried alive and whose final moments were spent in absolute terror, clawing at her coffin lid. Now let's travel to 1937 France, where a motorcycle accident leads to the strangest medical case of the century. You're Angelo Hays, a 19-year-old French motorcyclist, and you've just crashed your bike at high speed. Your head smashes into something hard. Witnesses run over to help, but you're clearly dead. Your skull is caved in, you're not breathing, no pulse, you're cold. The local doctor examines you and signs the death certificate. Your devastated parents make funeral arrangements. You're buried in the town cemetery within 2 days standard procedure for the time, especially with your severe head injuries. Your family grieves. Your friends attend the funeral. You're in the ground, case closed. Except it's not closed, because your death triggers an insurance investigation. You had recently taken out a life insurance policy, and the insurance company suspects fraud. Maybe the accident was suicide. Maybe it was staged. They need to verify the cause of death. 3 days after your burial, insurance investigators get a court order to exhume your body for a proper autopsy. The gravediggers open your coffin, expecting a 3-day-old corpse. Instead, they find something impossible. You're still warm. Not body temperature warm, but warmer than you should be. One of the investigators notices your body doesn't have the right color. You don't look dead enough. On a hunch, he checks for a pulse. You have one. Faint. Incredibly slow, maybe 2 or 3 beats per minute, but it's there. You're alive. You've been buried alive for 3 days. They rush you to a hospital, and doctors are baffled. Your skull is fractured. You should be dead. But somehow, your body entered an extreme state of suspended animation. Your metabolism slowed to almost nothing. You needed almost no oxygen. The limited air in the coffin was somehow enough to keep you barely alive. You wake up weeks later in a hospital bed, confused and disoriented. You have no memory of being buried, no memory of the accident. The last thing you remember is riding your motorcycle. Doctors examine you extensively. You become a medical marvel, written up in journals across Europe. Your case inspires new research into near-death states and suspended animation. The truly absurd part comes later. You become a minor celebrity. You do interviews. You write a book. And then because humans are weird, you use your fame to launch a business. You invent and patent a security coffin with an alarm system, air vents, and emergency supplies, marketed to people terrified of being buried alive. You literally profit from your own near-death experience. You live until 2008, dying at age 90, having spent 71 years being the guy who was buried alive and survived. Your gravestone could have said buried twice, lived once, reversing poor Marjorie McCall's inscription. Let's head to South Carolina in 1915 for a funeral that went spectacularly wrong. You're Essie Dunbar, a young woman living in the American South, and you've just had an epileptic seizure so severe that everyone thinks you've died. The local doctor checks for vital signs, finds none, and declares you dead. Your family is devastated. Your sister, who lives in another town, is immediately sent for to attend the funeral. But there's a problem. She lives far away, and travel is slow in 1915. Your family faces a dilemma. It's hot. Bodies decompose quickly. They can't wait too long, but they also can't bury you without your sister present. They compromise. They'll hold the funeral as soon as legally possible, and hopefully your sister arrives in time. She doesn't. The service proceeds without her, The preacher gives the eulogy. Mourners file past your open casket to pay respects. They're lowering your coffin into the ground when your sister finally arrives, horse-drawn carriage racing into the cemetery. She's hysterical. She missed the service. She demands to see you one last time. The funeral director tries to explain that you've already been lowered into the grave. She doesn't care. See you. Now. So they stop the burial, haul your coffin back up, which requires several men and considerable effort, and open the lid for your sister. She looks down at you. You look dead, pale, still, exactly like a corpse should look. She leans in closer, and then your eyes open. You sit up. You have no idea where you are or why you're in a box surrounded by screaming people. You're still groggy from the seizure, confused, disoriented. You ask what's happening. Absolute pandemonium. People scream and run. Several mourners faint. The preacher drops his Bible and backs away, making the sign of the cross. Your sister faints directly onto your coffin. One man has a heart attack from the shock he survives, but he never attends another funeral. The funeral director stands frozen, watching his entire understanding of death and burial crumble before him. You climb out of your coffin, still wearing your burial dress, and someone explains that you were dead and they were burying you. You point out that you're clearly not dead. This is hard to argue with, given that you're standing there talking. You go home, still in your funeral dress, past neighbors who saw you in a coffin 30 minutes ago. You live for another 47 years, dying in 1962 at age 66. At your actual funeral, they wait an extra day just to be absolutely sure. Finally, let's jump to 2018 South Africa for a modern nightmare that proves this horror isn't ancient history. You're Sipho William Mdletshe, and you've had way too much to drink. Your family finds you passed out in a field, completely unresponsive. They try to wake you, nothing. They check for breathing, can't find any. They check for a pulse, can't find one either. They call for help, but you're in a rural area. By the time anyone arrives, you've been dead for a while. You're cold, you're stiff, you're clearly gone. Your family is devastated, but not entirely surprised you'd been struggling with alcoholism for years. They make arrangements for a funeral, but you're not embalmed. That's expensive, and your family doesn't have much money. Instead, they put you in a coffin and store you in a mortuary while they scrape together money for a proper burial. Days pass, then weeks. You're in that coffin for almost 3 weeks before they have enough money for the funeral. The day finally comes. Your family gathers at the cemetery. It's an early morning service. They want to bury you before it gets too hot. The coffin is sealed. They've already said their goodbyes at the mortuary. The workers are preparing to lower you into the ground when someone hears something. A sound from inside the coffin. Probably just settling, someone says. Bodies make noises as they decompose. But then they hear it again. Louder this time. Definitely knocking. From inside, the sealed coffin. Everyone freezes. The knocking becomes frantic, desperate. Your family is screaming. Workers are backing away. Someone finally has the presence of mind to pry open the coffin lid. You're alive. You've been alive this whole time. For 3 weeks, you've been in some kind of coma or suspended state, and you woke up just in time inside a sealed coffin, about to be buried. You're weak, dehydrated, confused, but very much alive. They rush you to a hospital. You're suffering from severe dehydration and near starvation, but you survive. The story goes viral. News crews show up. Scientists want to study you. How did you survive 3 weeks with no food or water? Your family is grateful but also traumatized. They spent weeks mourning you, only to discover they almost buried you alive. The mortuary workers are investigated. The doctor who declared you dead faces questions about how he could make such a mistake. You recover physically, but the psychological impact is severe. You now have claustrophobia and an intense fear of confined spaces. Your family installs a doorbell in your house that you can ring from anywhere if you collapse, so they'll know to check more carefully. You give up drinking entirely. The experience was better than any rehab program. When you eventually die, for real, years later, your family waits 3 full days before even considering funeral arrangements, and they insist on a coffin with an interior release mechanism, just in case. So there you have it. 5 people who experienced the ultimate nightmare, waking up, buried alive, a woman saved by grave robbers trying to steal her ring, A young mother who died of grief twice, the second time clawing at her coffin lid. A motorcyclist who became a medical marvel and then sold safety coffins. A woman who sat up during her own funeral and gave everyone heart attacks. And a modern man who knocked from inside his coffin minutes before being buried forever. The common thread is our species' oldest fear, the fear of being conscious but trapped, of screaming where no one can hear, of clawing at wooden walls that won't break. These stories are why Victorians invented elaborate safety coffins with bells and breathing tubes, why some cultures developed traditions of waiting days before burial, why modern embalming practices exist you cannot wake up if they've replaced your blood with formaldehyde. The truly terrifying part is how many people throughout history were buried alive and never escaped. No grave robbers, no insurance investigations, no late arriving sisters, just darkness and panic and slow suffocation. We only know these 5 stories because they had impossibly lucky endings. How many didn't? Which one freaked you out the most? The scratched coffin lid? The funeral resurrection? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching. My name is Dr. Hollowstone, and I am really smart. Until next time, farewell.